Hello, everybody. I'm back. You cannot know, lightning, light. You do not know how I have missed talking to you. My oral surgery went well, and thank you so much for all your prayers and your thoughts and your best wishes. Some of you had a chance to get caught up, which is a good thing, because I know I give you a lot at once, but that's just how it is. So I'm back. I have some stitches in my mouth, which will come out on Monday. But basically, I am able to speak again. What a blessing. So, what I want to do today is review a little bit of what we have gone through. Many of you by now know my story. Many of you know that I've been reading about 5:30 this time every day. And many of you know that I am a woman who is very committed to love, literally. For those who are new, and some of you are, I check out your profiles, as you may check out mine. And you can go to susanmintz.com and review. Just check everything out at your leisure. And the books are available, the interviews, everything's available. I'm going to go back over what I call baby steps, which is chapter 11. And the reason I want to do that is because after the diagnosis and the personals with Jeff and I, the main things that you are going to have to go through in your life, and I can be more emphatic than ever, you will. You are going to face certain things in your life, and you're not going to feel like you have the strength to get through. I deal with long-term illness. Whether it was Jeffrey or my parents, long-term illness is where I function. Nobody has died immediately in an airplane crash or been hit by a car. So, shock and grief and all that are real. But I have to give you the steps and what I learned to do and how I was able to manage a very difficult situation. So to back up, we went through the fear factor, and all of you, and I'm saying, when I say all of you, everybody in life is going to go through this. Not maybe long term, but you're going to go through feelings and emotions that have to deal with things that are very, very important. We went through the fear factor when I was afraid of Jeffrey contracting AIDS because he was a promiscuous bisexual in the 70s and 80s. My choice and his agreement to abstain from just a sexual relationship in 81 is what saved my life, but there was no problem other than a sexual relationship. Everything in our marriage continued the same. No more lies. How many of you have had to deal with that when facing yourself? Lies. Eventually your lies catch up. Chapter 6 was why me, and I gave you the 3 biggest ones, but mostly I give you the why me's. You have hundreds of why me's going through you when you get a diagnosis, either for yourself or family member or someone as a best friend. The why me. Well, I say, why not you? Why not me? I'm not that special. Is there a God? People in the clergy who are born to the clergy might say, you never have to question God or doubt God. I don't buy that. There are going to be times in your life when you are going to question your faith. You are going to question God, even if it's just to say, what more? Little Job action here. What more? But he never stopped believing. Frustration factor. Absolutely. I get frustrated when my hair doesn't come out right. You don't think you're going to get frustrated when you're taking care of someone with a long-term, life-threatening illness and things are not going the way you thought they were going to go? Uh-huh. Get ready for fear, get ready for frustration, and get ready for what I love to start is the meat. This is the heart of my book. Because these issues, these factors are not in the short story. The short story is just an encapsulation, an edited version of my story. If you did have my book, you would be able to see the different chapters in this. But I also would not be able to explain it, and I feel the explanations are extremely important. That's what makes it better for me to share it with you, explaining more in detail about some of this. So then we have personal touches in an impersonal world. That's because Jeff was going to be in the hospital for a few weeks, and in order for me to see him get better, there were things I had to do. I brought my house into his room. Pictures, souvenirs, all sorts of photographs, and mostly I cooked because he would not eat hospital food, my princess. So the cook I was able to say, here we go. I also made extra for the nurses and the staff, which they greatly appreciated. I stayed in the room, and other than to go home and change or to make food, I was with him for the 2 weeks he was there. The next part that's very important was prioritizing and organizing. Some people are not born for this, and you're going to have, and there's no book. My book is probably as good as any out there on how to prioritize and organize, because I was born with those gifts. I'm highly structured to the point that friends are very upset because I set a bar so high for me and I don't expect them to come on. But I set a high bar, but I was blessed with the gifts of prioritizing my life, organizing everything, labeling, and I was okay with this. So we had personal touches. Then when he came home on July 4th weekend, I was apprehensive, and I was frustrated, and I was so excited to have him home. But it was not easy because it was a holiday weekend. He was very ill yet. He wasn't ill like he was in the hospital, but I was dealing with someone very fragile. And it made it very frightening for me if something were to happen and I wasn't equipped. I got equipped as this went on. Don't think it was just, I brought him home and everything was going to be fine. No, the journey was absolutely just beginning. So prioritizing and organizing, I took from his room at the hospital. I put everything back in the house. So when he came in, he said it was the most beautiful house he'd ever seen. I took his previous meds, zippered them up, dated them, and put them away so he wouldn't see them. There was the other things that were just organizing what he had to do. He had to relax, he had to eat, he had to sleep, and I had to be in charge of everything. The phone, there were monitors. I was monitoring his phone. The phones were up the hook, and other than his parents, whom I called twice a day, I told them they were carte blanche to him, but everybody else, if Jeff felt the strength to call you back, I would take your name when you called and let you know that he was resting or eating. Eating was still very challenging because he would cough and breathe in and eat at the same time. And what was so effortless was sleeping with him, and was so effortless was eating, and everything we did was so incredible. But with this illness took over with that pneumonia, and he was so gravely ill, nothing was right. The sleeping, the eating, I had to focus. Forget about me. I had to focus on him, yet I didn't forget about me, because if I wasn't good for me, I wouldn't be good for anybody. So I trusted God, I trusted myself, and I did that, and then I was able to take care of Jeffrey. Baby steps. This is where I want to continue, because some of my baby steps were the first time he actually finished a meal without falling asleep and watching a movie. Movies and dinner were so wonderful for us. We loved it. But the first baby step took weeks and weeks before he could watch a movie with me and not fall asleep. The other baby steps were when he finally said he wanted to go out and eat. The next baby steps were when he'd put the 20 pounds back on. Now remember, I have been documenting every detail in journals. Those journals have been transposed to a book, but I tell everybody to write, 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 write. So baby steps. As I said, I want to start here and reread some of this because it's extremely important. You will face fear, you will face frustration, you will take baby steps. Your baby steps might not be for weeks or months, but all of a sudden you will see a baby step. And they're personal. This was going back now when I started Chapter 11, Baby Steps. I started on April 27th, just a couple of days ago. October 1st, 1992, and I am repeating. I'm not going back over all the other. I've given you the table of contents. And again, I know some of you are going back over previous views, going over previous episodes, and you are catching up slowly. I don't blame you. You cannot do this quickly and give up your life for me. Though I would love you all to, but not going to happen. The long and challenging summer of 92 has come and gone. Do you remember watching the movie Baby Steps? In this comedy, Richard Dreyfuss played a psychiatrist treating Bill Murray, who has suffered for years with numerous fears and phobias. Throughout the movie, the term baby steps came to signify the slow and continuous progress that was accomplished, even though the progress wasn't always apparent. For me now, the words baby steps have become both personal and painful because they represent some of the most difficult and frustrating times we experienced as you recovered from pneumonia. As I watched this disease, and he had full-blown AIDS-related pneumonia, as I watched this disease consume his beautiful body, and we were so healthy and health conscious, as I watched this disease take over, that the baby steps seemed like they would never be. Some steps forward, where some steps were backwards. It was like a dance that was going nowhere. We were frustrated and fearful, but our goal was to continue working our way back to a quality of life we would enjoy again. Taking baby steps one day at a time kept us positive and was therapy, helping you to get well. Baby steps became my mantra and continued keeping me focused, as well as the writing. The first phase of your recovery. This was the phase of your recovery process. We were starting over, and everything we did became a first. My one priority was helping you to get your appetite back, and you couldn't regain your strength if you wouldn't eat. How many times did I relate at hospice to people who were going through this? He was having to save energy because he didn't have a lot of it to be able to eat and breathe and then cough. He wouldn't regain his strength unless he could eat. I diligently planned our meals, hoping that something would appeal to him. But for days I watched as he picked at his food. Then he had a voracious appetite, and I was an incredible cook. You couldn't chew and breathe at the same time because you were constantly coughing. It was obvious that he was forcing himself to eat. Then one evening, he actually finished his entire dinner. It took weeks for that first to happen. It was a celebration of accomplishment and determination. 12 weeks after your diagnosis, and it finally stopped. You weren't nauseous and didn't have diarrhea during dinner. That was a huge, huge baby step. 3 months of frustration and sometimes desperation trying to get you to eat was finally paying off. I somehow managed to work my little baby steps into little baby miracles. You were regaining your health as well as your confidence. One night, You wanted to go out for dinner and said, I want a double cheese, pepperoni, garlic, and anchovy pizza. And I said to him, you don't like anchovies. But he said, I'll eat anything at this time. Yeah, sometimes you don't know what you're going to do till you got to do it. As the pneumonia did worsen, so were his sleeping habits. He hadn't had a restful night's sleep in so long, and in the hospital they were in and out and in and out, and anybody who's been in a hospital for several weeks or even a week, you know what it's like being taken and being woken up at all hours of the day and night. There's no real rest. You could barely stay awake during dinner and couldn't watch TV for more than an hour without falling asleep. Eating and talking on the telephone exhausted you. He was still spiking fevers and breaking out in drenching night sweats. He woke up several times during the night extremely thirsty, wanting to drink. But he needed help getting to the bathroom because he was weak and disoriented. This is where I say you can have night lights out and you can be close by. We didn't sleep in the same bedroom on and off, but one eye. When you ever go through this, I can promise you one ear and one eye is always open. You never, ever take your mind off of it. Weeks went by, but one day you said, I don't need to lie down. I'm going to my desk to pay bills. I said, you hated paying bills. You loved getting the mail, but hated paying the bills. For weeks, you couldn't keep your eyes open during a movie. But when it come to paying the bills, that was even worse. But one day you said, I'll do anything now I have the energy. These were the little steps that I went through, from getting him to finally eat, to get to where he wanted to go to a movie, to get through where he wanted a pizza again, to get through having the energy to pay bills. He said, I was so happy to have the energy to do it. For weeks he couldn't keep his eye open during a movie. Then one afternoon, he wanted to go to the theater. It was the first time in months we watched the end of a movie together. One morning we woke up and realized you hadn't had a night sweat in days. We went to bed that evening laughing about the soup kitchen I was running. Your improvement was slowly happening. You were sleeping better, eating more, and finally optimistic about the future. It took 3 long, difficult months making those baby steps work. But our firsts felt wonderful. Here's where we're going to start for the new one. You were always a physical person, lifting weights, riding a bicycle, dancing, swimming, and walking. The pneumonia weakened you terribly, and the lack of physical activity caused your muscles to atrophy, and many of you can relate to that, for sure. You can all relate to almost any of this if you want to, or stick your head under the covers and pretend I'm not reading a book that's about life, real life, not fake life, real reality therapy life. One day a movie, a series, everybody's going to know about this love story. The pneumonia weakened you terribly, and the lack of physical activity caused your muscles to atrophy. When you came from the hospital, you couldn't walk to the bathroom alone. Your legs were wobbly, and you were dizzy. I followed you around for days because I was fearful you might fall. You would have to push yourself, Jeff, in order to gain your strength. But he was able to push himself because I was there pushing him. He had the support he needed. Unless you have some people or someone around you who will push you, who will do the things I did, your journey will be a lot harder. Starting an exercise program again posed many difficult, demanding, and painful challenges. Several times a day, you walked around the apartment. Each time you walked a little longer, and you felt stronger. One day I called to you, but you didn't answer. I was terrified that you had fallen down. The door opened, and you had the mail in your hands. I yelled at you for scaring me, but I was so excited because you felt strong enough to go downstairs and get the mail. Remember, we lived in a high rise, and it was rough. If the elevator didn't work, there was no way I'm carrying him. I remember the first time we took a walk around the block and the sprinklers went off. You ran through them with a burst of energy I hadn't seen in weeks. The first time you rode the stationary bike again, for just 10 minutes, you thought you would faint, and we would ride bicycles for hours and hours. I mean, we exercised. You'd never, ever have suspected that Jeff could be anybody who could have contracted this. It was our secret until there were no more lies. And on June 19th and 20th, the lies stopped. The first time you rode your stationary bike for 10 minutes, you thought you would faint. But every day you rode the bike, increasing your time a little bit more. One day you rode 40 minutes, and you weren't even breathing hard. I remember the first time you wanted to drive the car. We went dancing under a moonlit sky, holding each other to the song, quote, "Hold Me." After 3 months, you had your strength and energy back. We were walking on the beach, enjoying all the activities we used to. Your progress was so subtle and gradual that sometimes we didn't notice it. Those physical baby steps eventually paid off. People ask me sometimes why I don't listen to a lot of old music from the 60s or the 70s or the 80s. And that's because they bring back memories I really don't want to remember. We had songs that I did remember and that I play, but they were more current than when I was with Jeff, because music was such a part of our life. And I just can't keep going down memory lane. That stopped early on. I couldn't keep going down that route. Your emotional baby steps were the hardest to deal with. The stress had us on a roller coaster ride from hell. Regaining your emotional stability required tremendous patience, love, and determination 24 hours a day. AIDS didn't give up for 24 hours a day, and neither would I. And because of my determination, neither would Jeff. We experienced fear, anger, resentment, depression, and periods of isolation. You were frustrated and frightened. And he should be. He was frustrated and frightened, and I was frustrated and frightened. You suffered from anxiety attacks. I suffer from them now, 30 years later. I'm the one with them. But he suffered from anxiety attacks. These feelings and emotions were unpredictable, powerful, and as harmful as the deadly virus he carried. Remember, I'm talking 1992. Please do not relate it to today unless you're dealing with cancer, Alzheimer's, COVID, long haulers, or a bunch of other illnesses and diseases that can take you on that roller coaster ride from hell. You had to find a way to cope with your fears and with this disease. The issues were compounded because AIDS didn't have any cure and your prognosis wasn't good. There were many unknown factors involved, and you were apprehensive about the treatments and the medications. Your doctors were bombarding you with facts, figures, and clinical data that disturbed and confused you even more. I didn't have Google, and I didn't have a lot of people to ask this about. Most of our friends already had passed. Your doctors, as I said, there was so little even known. So much of this was random and just winging it. You had difficulty just getting up the courage to look at your lab results. You became depressed because your blood work never came back, quote, normal, and your counts were all out of range. It was a long and tedious process, but you began working around the disease. You established a new lifestyle and routine as you took your emotional baby steps, accepted your illness, and started to take back control of your life. It's 5 of 6, so I'm going to stop here, and we will continue still with more baby steps and then go on to stability, transitions, and plateaus. Part of the reason that I was always continuing, again, I will stress the writing, is because when you're bombarded with so much information, please don't think you're going to remember it. Not a chance. You will never remember all this stuff. And if you think you can figure it out, no. You take a long-term illness one day at a time, sometimes one moment at a time. Your baby steps may not seem like much, but eventually you will see progress. Jeffrey did well for a while. The next few chapters, again, will be information about how you will feel, and you will. These are the wills. I'm not saying maybe. You will feel fear, frustration, anxiety, depression. You will feel these issues if you go through a long-term illness, whether it's be a husband, a wife, a son, a daughter. Long-term illnesses don't care about your age. Yes, there's people 85 who are fine. There's people 15 who are in St. Jude's dealing with life-threatening illnesses. But get a support system around you and write and be honest. I think there was one other thing that I wanted to add, but I'm not sure about that with the emotional baby steps. I know I talked about, here it is. The first time, and I went with him to every procedure, everything. I took control of everything, and I went with him. The first time I went with him for his follow-up lab work. The lab work was all over the place. Nothing was normal. Nothing. Here is a 47-year-old man who previously all the time had the most perfect labs. It was awful. I left the doctor's office. He was still in there, but when I looked at the labs, I left the doctor's office. I was so hysterical, crying. It was off. Everything was off. There was nothing that made sense. I composed myself and went back in and spoke to the doctor with Jeff. And he said, Susan, he said, the labs are never going to be right. They're never going to be back to normal again. I had to accept that x-rays might not be perfect, labs might not be perfect, things were going to change. And when I finally accepted that, that was a big part of it. The next few chapters are going to be the best information I'm going to give you about accepting yourself, about accepting your circumstances, or perhaps not. But I will say that what we've done so far, and if you go to my website and you go to SusanMintz.com and you go to the books page and read the short story, if you go to the media pages and see all the interviews, and if you go to the photos on the first page, you will see what a handsome couple we made and how to this day I love him. And the reason I'm reading this book is because I know there have been some people who have commented and said that they are going through some of this also. So I want to say thank you. I will be back tomorrow. I'm not planning on having more teeth extracted. But thank you so much for being with me. I take none of you for granted. I don't take any of it for granted. The older I get, the more precious life is. But I wouldn't trade my memories or my life for anything. I would do it all over again. That's what love is. Love remembers the good. I will say to all of you, thank you. Shalom, hello. Shalom, goodbye. And shalom, peace. May you have a shalom night. And be kind. Be patient. Have a little more. And call someone and tell them you love them. Old school. But thank you so much for being with me and being so loyal and just so necessary in my life while I'm doing this. Because I may make it seem like it's easy, but it's not. It's a challenge, but God gave it to me and I shall fulfill it. I'm going to hit finish and that's it. Shalom.